Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the City of Santa Clara Homelessness Task Force meeting 2. We're really excited to have you all with us here today. And next slide, we'll have the agenda for today. So we're basically wanting to go over the following items. We're going to go into some brief introductions in a second and outline the goals for the meeting, as well as review some types of homelessness programs and supportive services, and have some discussion there, discuss our community engagement strategy, and go into some wrap up and next steps for subsequent meetings. And just to provide an introduction of our team, myself, Joy, Eli, and Carla are all from Homebase, a nonprofit technical assistance provider, and we're here today as facilitators of the task force. And next slide. We've also set up this slide to provide acknowledgement to the city staff who are present today, and have them introduce themselves. Andrew, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. I'm Andrew Crabtree, as it says on slide, Director of Community Development. So I oversee the city's housing programs as well as planning, land use planning, and building permitting programs.
Great.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. And I'm Adam Marcus. I work in the Housing and Community Services Division. So we work on homelessness and grant making, as well as affordable housing production.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Deeger. I'm the sergeant that's in charge of the Santa Clara Police Department's community response team. Amongst other things, we tackle issues surrounding homelessness and mental health.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Carvalho. I'm a staff aide in the Housing and Community Services Division. And I think you already know what we all do. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And on the next slide, we have the names of our task force members. So let's see here. We can just move through the list. So Lori, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Lori, and I don't know if it's that I have to stop and start because everybody is talking, and so I'm not sure if that's for anybody else, but it is for me. So, but hi, I'm Lori, and I live in North San Jose, in Santa Clara behind Levi Stadium, and I'm excited to help any way I can. Actually, did a couple different homeless people and interviewed them and food and just seeing how they got out there on the streets and what in the future. So anyway, thank you. And I'm excited.
Thanks, Lori. Dante, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'm Dante Ortica. I'm the Lived Experience Advisory Board Chair for Santa Clara County. I am part of District 3 here in West Santa Clara. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Dante. Daniel?
Yes. Hello. Yeah. Hello, I'm Daniel Hood. I'm glad to finally be joining the homelessness task. I'm representing City Council District 4. Joy, are we doing introductions like we did for the first meeting, or should I do that because I wasn't there for the first meeting, or should we just go on to next district?
Sure. Yeah, you can say a little bit more, but we'll keep the introduction section brief for today. Okay,
no problem. Well, as well, like I said, it's great to finally join the task force, and I really got into solving the homelessness crisis through in college when I joined the San Jose State's Student Homeless Alliance, and so I'm here taking it up next level to in an official status. I've heard a lot of, I've talked to a lot of homeless people, and that conversation some of you were having earlier that really connected to me because another statistic, local statistic that really speaks to how bad the homelessness crisis is here in Silicon Valley is that 13% of San Jose State students are homeless.
Yeah, thanks for introducing yourself, Daniel. Since we didn't get to hear from you at the last meeting, and we're excited to welcome you onto the task force today. But we'll go ahead and carry on with our brief intros. Let's see, Michelle, would you like to go next? Michelle, if you're trying to talk, I think you're muted.
Is that better?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, because I have another video that says I'm not, am I on video?
We can't see your video, but we can hear you.
Because I can see you guys. Let me do something real quick here. Okay. Okay, can you see me now?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm part of the task force, homeless task force members, because I was also at one time homeless. So this topic relates close to home, and I want to be a part of the solution and giving back to the community, because I know what it's like being homeless, front line. But as of now, I am housed. So that's where I'm at.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Kat, would you like to go next?
Hi, good evening. My name is Kat Pham. I'm a resident of Santa Clara since 2014, and I also am an active member of Stand Up for Kids, which is an organization that helps at-risk youth and that are also homeless. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you. Hong, would you like to go next?
There's a
Hi, everyone. My name is Hong Kao, and I am here from the County of Santa Clara Office of Supportive Housing on behalf of my colleague, Hillary Baroga, who unfortunately has a conflict. She's actually doing a presentation on interim housing case studies right now as part of our Affordable Housing Month. So just really brief introduction, since I wasn't here the last meeting. When she asked me to step in for her tonight, I was really excited because I said, hey, I grew up in Santa Clara. Our family came to the US from Vietnam, and I started elementary at Catherine Hughes, and then went on to Booksir and graduated from Santa Clara High. So this is, my mom and sister all still live in Santa Clara. So this is really a meaningful experience and really close to home for me to be here tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Hong. And Vivian?
Hi, good evening. I'm Vivian from Abode Services, and we provide housing and services in Santa Clara City and the full county as well. And we just had a grand opening where I was able to see some of y'all last week for our Calabasas apartments, 145 units, 80 of which are dedicated to folks coming out of homelessness. So that's super exciting.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So we can go to the next slide. We just have some quick Zoom notes for the task force members. So if possible, I see a lot of you already have your video on. We'd love to see your faces. So if possible, you can keep your video on, and please raise your hand at any point if you have a question, or you can chat to us as moderators as well. Just as a reminder, we will be recording the session, so it will be shared on the city's website after this meeting. And as Carla chatted to you all, if you need help with Zoom, please feel free to chat to us or email our team at the City of Santa Clara at homebasebcc.org. And on the next slide, we have some norms for attendees. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A function to submit a question to the facilitators, and we'll do our best to get an answer to you as soon as we can. We will be moderating the Q&A section, as well as recording the session. And same thing, if you need help with Zoom or you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can feel free to send a question through the Q&A or email our team. And on the next slide, we've just laid out some more discussion guidelines and norms. So just a quick reminder that the task force has established and accepted these guidelines for discussion today, and we'll be holding a couple opportunities for task force members to discuss and engage. So we ask that you all engage and follow these norms, speaking from your, sorry, is anyone else getting a lot of feedback?
Yeah, everyone can mute while Joy's talking. We won't get that.
Great, thanks, Dante. But yes, so just some basic guidelines, be as present as you can, and respect all perspectives of the folks that are engaging in the conversation today, and really listening to understand and speaking from all folks' experience. We want to hear from as many folks as possible. And if we go to the next slide, our goals of today's meeting are to essentially review homelessness programs and services, build out our community engagement strategy, as well as hold space for discussion and input from our task force members. And I will turn it over to Eli to take us through some next slides.
Great, thanks, Joy. So as we review the sort of homelessness programs and services, that is going to take some presenting from us. And the approach we're going to take is as little presenting as possible to allow us to have a conversation. And so we're hoping to get through some slides pretty quickly, which means that we will not be giving a full, complex understanding of all of the different types of programs and services that can help address homelessness and support unhoused people. So if you are super familiar with these programs and services and I am simplifying things, that's why. We're leaving space for questions. Once we've gone through some slides and I've presented a little basic information about each of the different types of programs and services we're talking about, there's going to be more time for questions. And that's one place where we're going to throw to and sort of lean on the folks on the task force who work in this area to, you can absolutely raise questions if you want, but also to help respond to some of the questions that other folks might have. So the order of operations will be I and a couple folks from the city will share some information about different types of programs and services and approaches. And then we'll have a chunk of time for discussion. So to start with, I want to give a quick update on the 2022 point in time count. If you remember from our last task force meeting, we presented quite a bit of data about homelessness in the community. And a lot of that information, a lot of those numbers were from the annual point in time count. And as we discussed, that didn't happen the last couple of years because of the pandemic. We told you we would let you know when the 2022 numbers started coming out, and there was an initial release of some overall numbers. We don't have numbers yet by city jurisdiction, so we don't have numbers specific to the city of Santa Clara, but we have the overall county numbers. And what we can see is that according to the PIT count, right, which is a flawed source of information as all sources of data are, we talked a little bit about some of the limitations of the PIT count last time. The point in time count hasn't changed super significantly. One of the things we see is that the number of people who are unsheltered, meaning people who are sleeping outside or in their vehicles or in places that aren't meant for people to live or to sleep, that number has stayed pretty stable. It's gone down a little bit, but that's just variation, right? It's stayed pretty stable. The number of people who were sheltered in 2022 versus 2019 went up. That was the increase that we saw. And a lot of the reason behind that is likely that in response to the pandemic, the number of shelter beds, the number of temporary housing beds increased. So there was just more capacity. So there were more people in those shelter beds. So just a little update on point in time count data. And again, as we learn more about the city numbers, we'll bring them to you. So as I said, we're going to go over some information to introduce what are the things that happen in this community and in communities in general to support people who are unhoused and to address homelessness. These are some words I'm going to be using. Rental assistance. It's literally that. It's assistance with rent, meaning it's money, it's financial help that helps people pay rent. So if I say rental assistance, that just means somebody is providing a subsidy or a voucher or help paying rent in a room or an apartment. Case management is a phrase that's used a lot in this area, and it is typically refers to like a person or a group of people who help the person who's getting the case management, right? They help the person who's in crisis to set goals and to make a plan. That's the main role of case management, right? Helping someone who is in crisis or needs support to set their own goals and make a plan, right? That's something we all need to be able to do, and it's really hard to do when you're having a crisis like that. Supportive services is another phrase you're going to hear a lot. We'll get into this a lot more on the next slide, but supportive services is sort of a phrase that's used to mean all the stuff that we as humans need to support ourselves in our lives, right? The stuff we can't do on our own sometimes, like medical care, mental health care, job training, public benefits or supportive services, childcare. And then permanent housing is an important concept. So permanent housing is a place that someone can stay indefinitely, right? Usually we think about permanent housing as a place where you have a lease or a sublease. And permanent housing is an important concept because it's it's not shelter. Shelter is a place where someone can't stay for years and years and years, or shouldn't stay for years and years and years, because shelter's not built to do that. Shelters are built to give people a place to sleep. Whereas when we talk about permanent housing as like a concept, that's a place where someone could stay, a place where someone has the right to stay because they're a tenant and they have a lease. So these are just definitions, right? These are just language I'm going to be using. So, you know, if you want to refer back, if I'm using the word rental assistance and you've forgotten, we'll send this slide out obviously after the meeting today. Now we're going to get into these types of supports that exist. And the first thing we're going to talk about is supportive services as a whole. There's a lot of different types of supportive services, right? And we talk about things like medical care, behavioral health care, education support, job training, life skills support, right? Learning how to write a budget, learning how to open a bank account, learning how to go grocery shopping. When you think about it, these are things that everybody needs. It's just when I needed to learn how to make a budget and go grocery shopping, I don't remember doing that because it was something that was just built into the resources I had access to. It was built into you know, what was naturally there in my life. That's not true for everybody for a lot of different reasons. And so when we talk about supportive services, it's making sure that everybody has these things as they need them. Yeah. Sometimes supportive services can be targeted to people who are unhoused, be targeted to people who are experiencing homelessness, right? A job training program that's focused on supporting people who are experiencing homelessness, for example. Sometimes supportive services are just generally available and someone needs support to connect to them, like medical care, you know, child care, things like that. And as we go forward with the task force, if supportive services is an area that you all want to look more into, if you want to talk about, okay, how are people getting behavioral health care in the community, right? What does that look like? We can talk about some of the potential sources of behavioral health care in the community. We can talk about some of the potential barriers to getting that particular type of support. Next, we're going to talk about homelessness prevention. Homelessness prevention that's pretty much what it sounds like. Again, like it's a way to prevent people who are currently housed from losing that housing. Right? This can look like help paying rent, help paying other bills. It can look like case management, someone to help you make a plan. It can look like referrals to some of those supportive services like legal services or job training. In the county of Santa Clara, community-wide, there is a homelessness prevention system. As of March 1st, the reported outcomes were about 92% of the households that were supported through homelessness prevention were housed when they left those services. And I want to check in with our city team to see if there are any sort of local context or comments on homelessness prevention that you all want to provide. Any context?
Yeah, thanks, Eli. I could just jump in for one quick second. So just this week, actually, the city council renewed its commitment to the homelessness prevention system by continuing another 2-year grant to support the system. And that contribution is estimated to help approximately 20 households over the next 2 years. And so there is an ongoing, and that's following on previous years of support from the city. So it is a system that the city does support, and it is a no wrong door system. So anyone in the city of Santa Clara can access, can call our office, and we can help you get connected to one of the providers.
Thanks, Adam. Next, we're going to talk about street outreach. This is one of the, I think, more familiar and visible forms of support and programming that happens. Street outreach is a way of engaging people and building relationships. It's a way of making sure that we have, that we know the people in the community, in our community, who are unhoused, that we can deliver that coordinated entry assessment. Street outreach can also involve bringing basic hygiene and food and safety supports. Things like mobile showers, things like trash pickup can be a form of outreach. Medical and mental health can also be included in outreach. And then not so much street outreach per se, but a drop-in center can be a form of outreach, a place where someone knows they can come and connect, get those basic services, and start to engage with a system. So we have a city council member, Councilmember O'Neill, who's just joined us, and we're going to make you a panelist and invite you to introduce yourself if you would like. Okay. All right, we'll leave that door open, but let us know, Councilmember, if you'd like to jump into the panel and say hello. Back to outreach. So the context I've brought in the slide here is from that January point in time count, that count of people who are unhoused in the community. What the number that I pulled is specific to the city of Santa Clara, and it's the number of people who were unsheltered, meaning they were living or sleeping outside or in cars or in some place that wasn't an emergency shelter and wasn't a home. So about 326 people as of January of 2019, approximately, who are the target audience for street outreach. And I believe I'm going to pass to Sergeant Dager to talk about street outreach.
Yeah, thanks. So kind of what this looks like in practice is where my team, kind of where like the rubber meets the road, if you will. The team is designed with 2 crisis response or community response team members, and then 2 crisis intervention specialists, which focus on mental health. So when we do street outreach, it's both proactive and reactive, meaning members of the community can reach out to us and notify us of an area where maybe there's an encampment that has been set up, or there's areas that we know of, like Bassett Street is a good example in our city where there's a lot of RVs and there's people that are in need of housing. One of the things that we do is we network with a lot of different entities. So like just today, we had a business reach out to us that there was a subject that was causing some disturbances. We were able to go out with our crisis intervention specialist and kind of connect with this person from a compassionate angle and realize that he was a vet and he had access to resources that he didn't necessarily understand previously that he could access. So we're working with him and we have a very promising lead to get him into housing. So this is kind of where it's the ground truth, so to speak, where we have entities, not just the police department, but non-governmental entities and faith-based, I mean, you name it. But these people getting out onto the street and actually reaching out to people to notify them of the resources that are available, the services that are available. Because really in my experience, the supportive services are hugely important. We get a lot of mental health issues and a lot of drug-related issues, or a combination thereof, that are acting as a barrier to somebody and maybe perhaps causing them to even refuse housing or refuse services. So this is just a way to build relationships. You may not get through to somebody the first time, the second time, the third time, but through building connections and building relationships. And I have a lot of stories. I won't get into them because I'm trying to keep it short, where we've actually been able to break down that barrier, form a bond, and get somebody to trust us enough to accept that help and get to the place that they want to be.
Thank you. Thank you for that local context. Moving quickly forward, emergency shelter. Again, one of the more familiar approaches, right? Shelter is a place to sleep. It also is a really, really varied, diverse approach. When we say emergency shelter, I think one of the most common things that folks picture is a big room full of beds or cots or mattresses. And that is one type of shelter, a more traditional approach. But shelter can also look like hotel rooms that are paid for by a provider or by a local government. They can look like a tiny home or a small unit construction. There's a lot of different ways that shelter can look. Looking at shelter across the community, again, across the county of Santa Clara, in sort of the year, February to January of this year, about 34% of participants were exiting shelter into housing. And that's a higher number than we typically see. And again, probably related to the large number of shelter placements that happened during the pandemic in order to keep people in places where they could be safe from COVID. And there was a focused push to house out of those specific shelters. And then when we're talking about cost of these, we often get questions about cost of these interventions. The costs vary widely. And it really depends on where the costs live, right? Are we constructing a place to have a shelter, which is a huge upfront cost? Are we using hotels, which is a lower upfront cost? And then the per night cost per person really varies also depending on the model of the shelter. And are there any local thoughts from the city on shelter for this one, or should we move forward?
I was just going to mention that in the city of Santa Clara, we do have some resources in terms of Bill Wilson Center, in terms of shelter for youth. And then when we do get requests, we will also refer folks outside of the city to nearby shelters.
Thank you. The next 3 slides, we're going to be talking about project types or resources that are really focused on housing, getting human beings into housing, right? The previous 3 types of services we can think about as things that homelessness prevention can help people stay in housing, but outreach and shelter, there's not necessarily a specific housing related component of those. Those are parts of the system that work to support people towards housing, but they don't have that housing support per se, whereas the next 3 are the housing piece. So the first thing we're going to talk about is rapid rehousing is sort of the common term for this, but really what we're talking about is medium term housing support, meaning rental assistance, usually, right? Help paying rent in a unit that you have a lease in, case management, that person-to-person support for planning, and supportive services, right? Hugely important part of any of these housing projects. So the supportive services for someone in rapid rehousing are often really focused on things that will support long-term stability for that person and help that person increase income. the thing the case manager is working with the person on is, what are the barriers to you? What makes it difficult for you to stay in housing on your own? Let's work on those things, right? So there has to be a lot of support around that person for rapid rehousing to work for most people. Because in rapid rehousing, the person gets an apartment or a room that they're renting, and they get help paying rent for usually somewhere up to 2 years. But it's built into rapid rehousing that the assistance will end eventually, right? So it's really important that those supportive services help someone get to that place so that they don't lose housing at the end of the services. In the county of Santa Clara as a whole, about 79% of folks who were served in this year period were housed at the end of the rapid rehousing project. And as of March of 2020, we know that at least 162 people who are connected to the city of Santa Clara and have been assessed in our coordinated entry system need something like rapid rehousing, meaning they need some sort of medium term, that up to 2 years type of assistance, instead of assistance that will last indefinitely, will last permanently. And that's sort of what we think based on the assessment responses that they gave. I'm going to move forward to transitional housing, and then we can sort of reflect on those together. So transitional housing is, it's similar to rapid rehousing in some ways. The length of time is often about similar. The folks, the sort of range of need that transitional housing is targeted to is often similar, but the environment and the type of the design of the project is often different, or it is different. In rapid rehousing, right, someone is in an apartment or a room that they're renting from a landlord, just any landlord in the community, and then the project is helping them pay that rent. Usually in transitional housing, the provider, the nonprofit or the local government who's supporting the project, they've rented a unit or they own a unit, right? We own this building, we're renting this house from a landlord as the project, and the participants in transitional housing are going to live there, right? So the big difference is transitional housing is sort of provider operated housing, where usually it's expected that people will move out of that housing at the end. Whereas in rapid rehousing, you're already a renter. So ideally you just stay renting where you are. In transitional housing, those folks will move out at the end. And in the recent year of data that we have, about 32% of folks were housed when they exited transitional housing. And this was a little bit of a decrease from what we usually see, and again, potentially related to pandemic barriers. Any local context from the city folks on these interventions?
Yeah, I could just share a couple things. So in terms of rapid rehousing, in addition to the countywide program, the city does have its own local, what we call our tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA program. That's for people who make less than 60% of the median income. Currently, we're serving about 40 to 50 households, and we're focusing on serving families. And then in terms of transitional housing, the city has also supported, or I should say, there's also other resources in that the Bella Vista Inn, which is the Home Key project that is being renovated, that's going to provide 64 units of transitional housing with assistance from the state. And then of course there's Covenant House, which also provides housing for youth 18 to 24 for up to 2 years.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. Last one, I promise, and then we'll get some discussion questions. Permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is pretty specific type of approach, type of resource. And it's specifically focused on and targeted to people who are experiencing homelessness, who have a medical condition, a behavioral health condition, a disabling condition that means that they will very likely need long-term or permanent support. That's the idea behind permanent supportive housing. The idea is that it should be targeted to people who are very likely to need long-term support in order to remain housed. It has a lot of the same pieces of rapid rehousing and transitional housing. There is housing assistance, right? That can be either rental assistance or it can be a building that the project owns that folks are living in, right? But housing, a place to live is supported by permanent supportive housing. And then there's the case management, right? There's the goal setting, there's the action planning, and there are supportive services. And supportive services in permanent supportive housing can absolutely help folks increase their income, increase their economic dependence and independence in those ways. Often it's very focused on health and wellness, primarily, at least in the initial phases, in the initial years, because that's the target population for permanent supportive housing. People whose barriers to housing are related in part to medical and behavioral health needs. And permanent supportive housing should also focus on things like quality of life and connection to community. Of the folks who have been assessed in the coordinated assessment system, who are connected to the city of Santa Clara, about 243 folks based on that assessment are expected to need something like permanent supportive housing. It's the best estimate we have. And permanent supportive housing, one of the hallmarks of this intervention is that it tends to have a very high housing stability rate. So most recently across the county, the outcomes that we have are about almost 95% of folks are remaining housed. And Adam, remarks on permanent supportive housing at all?
Just very briefly, I wanted to highlight that the Calabasas apartments that I think Vivian might have mentioned earlier, that is our first permanent supportive housing project in Santa Clara, and we're very proud of it. 145 units of housing, and we also, right next door, we have the Kiefer Senior apartments that are on their way as well.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, the promised time has arrived. I'm not going to be talking much longer. So I would love to hear from you. We have about half an hour to have this conversation. And so we can we can come back to questions, maybe start with your first question, and then we can discuss that, and then we can come back if you have a couple questions in mind. But yeah, these are the discussion questions I'd like that you should feel free to cover, right? If you have questions, you should go ahead and ask your questions. If you want to talk about a type of service or program that you have either experienced or that you have seen or heard of or known about in the community, let us know. You can tell us what you have seen. Specifically, was your experience positive? Did it seem helpful? Or did you have concerns? And then ultimately, we're going to come back to the question, what do you all want to learn and discuss more about in the future? Which of these areas do you want to target your attention to? So starting with questions or reflections on these interventions. What's coming up for you all?
If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and speak for a moment. So just today, well, I've met a few of the homeless, and when I say homeless, like living like in the parks, and I've had the opportunity to talk to a man named Sandy who lives over at the Montague Park. And, and I asked him if I could, just ask him some questions because I see him a lot and I would like to drop off water or drop off food or whatever. And so I ended up having like a really in detailed conversation with him of where he came from and why he's homeless, and because he doesn't seem like he's an addict. He doesn't present himself as, I don't know. I couldn't tell you if he is or he isn't, but there might be some mental health things, but he was the nicest guy. And, he literally has his whole life, like right there at the park. And what really hit me so hard was that, he's like, I stay here in Santa Clara because I went to Montague when I was in 3rd grade, and my little boy goes there. I was picking him up from school, and that's how I see him all the time. And then he said that, before COVID, he had an apartment he was renting with his brother and he was working. And so my question to him was, well, do you have a cell phone? Do you know about the programs that are around? And he didn't know anything about anything, is what he told me. But his biggest thing was transportation. So getting somewhere to these support places to get the help that he needs, right? So I guess my question would be, is there transportation for some of these guys? And I'd maybe direct it towards, was it Gregory? The gentleman was talking who works with our people in our city, because transportation, I think, is a lot. Also his cell phone, he said it got broken or something, so he doesn't have that. But I told him if he went over on Center Road, he can probably get a Obama phone or whatever. And so anyway, so transportation is a big thing. And then how do we get them, to get these services that they need, I guess. So that's where I'll stop.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So interested in what I heard was you're seeing and you've heard from folks a need for transportation and things like cell phones, right? The things that connect us and allow us to communicate with the rest of the world, for sure. Yeah, Greg or anybody else on the call, do y'all have thoughts about what the community situation around transportation services and access to tech support, things like cell phones is?
So I was gonna say, I'm not sure if it's like this for the city of Santa Clara, but we can definitely check into it. I'll reach out to KJ. But I believe, through the coordinated entries, network, they do, based on what I was told by Leslie from HMIS and stuff, or they do provide go passes, and that might be strictly through the city of San Jose. I'm not sure, but we should look at if that's something that they do in city of Santa Clara, because folks could get like a VTA pass and be able to get on the bus or go to places that they need to go to to get services. But I'm pretty sure it's probably the same, because I think it's a county thing. But I'll check in with KJ and then I'll get back to you.
Dante, you're correct. That is,
You're
we
here.
can, not KJ. I know KJ would love to be here too,
Yeah.
and probably has more ideas, but we do have our Uplift program. You can, but we would have, so Lori, we would send someone from one of our outreach teams to engage with this gentleman and basically to assess his homelessness situation, right? And his vulnerability through our coordinated entry system. And that is how it's kind of like an entryway to all these services and programs that Eli just presented. So what he would be eligible for based on, his current situation. And while he's being assessed and waiting to, be eligible or qualify for a program, including maybe a shelter bed, he may have access to additional resources, such as an Uplift pass, where he can, get to ride the public transportation system. And that is something that, we can certainly connect him with. If you can provide, Adam or myself his information, I'm happy to follow up.
I see your hand, Santiago. Go ahead. Oh, I don't think you're unmuted yet.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
I don't think I got to introduce myself. My name is Santiago Arzondo. I'm part of the community at large member. Just to put input on the topic, I think the resources are there. I think just the engagement is not completely quite there, where I believe, the person and the resource is not meeting at one point. But sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. This is my first time doing this kind of thing, so.
No, thank you so much for asking a question, even though you're nervous. I think we've all been there, and I really appreciate you, or not asking a question, making a comment. I think, so that actually, Santiago, really ties in with a question we got in the Q&A from one of our attendees, which is, just generally, who is reaching out to people who are experiencing homelessness and telling them that services exist? How do we know, how many folks are being actually informed of these type of services? I think that gets to your comment, right? Like, it's maybe things
Right.
are there, but people don't know. And I think it gets to the experience Lori had, where there is maybe a transportation solution, but it just hasn't connected. So anybody want to speak to that, like outreach that's happening, what kinds of gaps are folks seeing in outreach? What are you all seeing happening in the community?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one to start. I think that at least it appears from my point of view that the majority of the outreach is actually happening, or it initiates with the police department, because that's kind of who people tend to call for, all of society's issues, no matter what it is. It's like, oh, I don't know, call the cops, right? So my team and I end up going out and being kind of the first response to a lot of these issues, whether it's an encampment that comes up or something that's been longstanding, like we talked about before. And so our goal is to try to connect with folks. And actually, it's funny, or interesting rather, that the gentleman in Montague Park came up, because we just went out this last week and spoke with two subjects that were staying there. And I think it's the same person, because he mentioned his brother. But it was very clear that there were some mental health issues that were going to be a big barrier. And it ultimately, we had kind of a productive conversation, and then there was some talk about the mountains shifting and things that were, clear indicators that this was going to need to be, like, the mental health aspect was going to need to be tackled first before we could kind of make progress anywhere else. So I guess to circle around to the point, which is, how do people get connected to resources? We take it on ourselves from a police department standpoint to network with a lot of different entities, as I mentioned before, so that when we go out, either reactive or proactive, when we contact somebody who's experiencing homelessness, we can try to have that face-to-face contact, see what it is that's going on, whether it is an addiction issue, it's a mental health issue, or simply they just need a little bit of a hand, right? And then try to connect them with the appropriate resource. We are doing that on a daily basis. I know there's probably other entities out there, and maybe someone else wants to hop in, but there's a tremendous amount of outreach that's happening from the police department standpoint on a daily basis.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. And I'm going to go to Dante. I see your hand, and then Santiago, is your hand still up or new comment? So we'll go to Dante and then Santiago if you have a new comment, and then Adam, and then Lori.
I didn't put it down, sorry.
All right, go ahead, Dante.
I was just going to say, one of the biggest reasons why I joined this board is just being the current chair for the Santa Clara County Lived Experience Advisory Board. We feel like South County, smaller cities like Santa Clara, Mountain View don't have a lot of representation as far as lived experience and really advocating and outreaching to folks. And so that's one of the things that, I would probably pose to this group for those that are interested. Our group is not selective just to San Jose. We need volunteers. We need folks. We do outreach weekly, typically in San Jose, right? But it's easy for me to say, hey, folks, we're going to create a 5-member team that's going to do outreach, and we're going to bring out pamphlets for what services or how folks can get connected to services in the city of Santa Clara or in the county of Santa Clara, and also provide them with hygiene kits and food. That's what we're doing weekly. But predominantly 99% of that is in San Jose. Every once in a while we go down to South County. So it's really more or less needing to know these things. And that's kind of what happens with large cities. When you're in a large metro area, a lot of times the smaller cities get overshadowed. But yeah, I would love to connect with folks and talk about, doing that and inviting you to our next meeting as well.
Thanks, Dante. And that the group, the board Dante was talking about is the Lived Experience Advisory Board. For those who didn't catch that name. Go ahead, Adam.
Just lowering my hand here. On the topic of outreach, we did just start Monday mornings doing Dignity on Wheels, which is a mobile shower and laundry service. So it'll be on Bassett Street. And so it is an opportunity for us to help get the word out and to hand out resource packets. And we're working with them to try to see if they can also do assessments. They need to do a little bit of training because they have a different system up in San Mateo County. But Monday mornings, for those, as we grow the the number of people who are using that service, we hope that that's at least one small way we can increase outreach and ways to hand out the resources and whatnot.
Thanks. So we're going to go through Lori, Daniel, and Santiago and wrap up this thread, because I want to see if there are other pieces aside from outreach that folks want to talk about. So go ahead, Lori.
Okay, yeah. So I think a couple of us are on the same wavelength, but I'm going to keep. I need Gregory's number, because I kind of took it upon myself when I started this task force. In my mind was, I need to be out there and meet people. Of course, if it's safe and all that, I'm not going to go out at nighttime or whatever. But and for me, it's it feels like that's an obligation that I set for myself, is like, I want to make sure that I'm out there and meeting people and then helping any way I can. And I think that food is a good thing too. And I've been doing this even before this task force, is just, feeding people for many years, because sometimes we have an overabundance. I think it's important. So my last question real quick is, this gentleman, and that's mental illness or not, was talking about how maybe somebody stole his identity. So are there services where people can help these people like get their licenses? And because I think I've read something about that, or check on their social security number and make sure that someone else is not using their information.
Yeah, I definitely want to bookmark. That's a great question, Lori. So when and where might someone get help with something like that, right? Getting documents like, an ID, things that might be helpful. Yeah, for sure. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, while we're talking, about access, I'd like to bring up or relate, remember on one of the past slides, about barriers to services and outreach is lack of trust. And, I think a major thing we need to do to help solve homelessness is to ensure that is to build trust so that people can feel safe accessing the services and the help they need. Because I was talking with this during my time with the Student Homeless Alliance. We went across the street to Grace Baptist Church, and we were talking with some homeless people to do some work for the city of San Jose. And I've heard some pretty serious allegations from people I talked to there. Thankfully, I don't think that these are in Santa Clara. I'm not Santa Clara, but since this, I think they still need to be addressed. I know the shower services. One woman have accused one of them of there's some peeping toms, and I know that with one shelter I heard in one shelter in Sunnyvale there was a few of them there have been allegations of nepotism, corruption, but like I said, we need to ensure that these the services and services offered can be trusted so that people can get the help they need.
Thanks for that, Daniel. Yeah, so we've heard, I think we've heard concerns about outreach in the city of Santa Clara and maybe wanting to increase that. I think Daniel brought up concerns about, what do the services look like and how are they like welcoming and obviously safe and supportive for people. Santiago, go ahead.
Excuse me. Is there like maps that organizations keep to keep track of where they go and who goes to engage with the homeless?
It sounds like outreach is something we want to talk more about. And I don't want to totally put off that question, Santiago, but I think there's a lot to say about coordination of outreach. So I know that there are folks on this call who have a lot to say about, how outreach is being coordinated. I see Dante, you have answers about this from the League's perspective. But I think I might suggest, just for time, and because part of what we want to do is bookmark like what we want to talk about at future meetings. Maybe we say, yeah, let's dive deep into outreach. I want to do a quick check of the task force members. is outreach something that y'all are interested in being not the only thing we look into, but one of the things we come back to?
For sure.
Karen, yes.
Yeah.
Nods. Okay, great.
Yes.
Vivian, go for it.
I was going to move on from outreach, so I don't want to.
That's great. That's exactly where we want to go. Perfect.
So I was going to say a gap in the system that I often see is between rapid rehousing and PSH, right? So oftentimes, folks need services for a little while to get connected, to get, childcare, to get, whatever. And at the end, they might not need many services. They just need affordable housing. So a lot of times after, rapid rehousing, both the services and the rental assistance ends. And sometimes it's okay for the services to end because they just need affordable housing. Whereas PSH is there, there for long term, and the services are there for long term because it's a higher level of need. But it's that really affordable housing piece that is so often needed. People sometimes don't need a ton of services, they just need someplace to live that's affordable. So we miss that in the homeless service side. So, and I'm not talking about only building affordable housing, I'm talking about, long-term subsidies like, housing authorities provide, and sometimes cities can provide too.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vivian. That's something that we hear in communities, not every community you go into, but quite frequently, where like it's rapid rehousing is enough for some people. It's like a long enough time to get some people to a place where they can pay for housing on their own. But in a community like Santa Clara County, where housing costs are so high for everyone, it's hard for everyone to pay rent. Sometimes that cliff at 2 years is too sudden, but there isn't that need for permanent supportive housing. There isn't that need for the services that go on forever. Do other folks have thoughts on that topic or anything else?
I was gonna just mention, based on the questions that were up there earlier, one of the things that I think also for those that don't have lived experience or don't do this work day to day, just something I think we should definitely talk about is ELI housing for sure, and what that looks like. And I know Ray's here too. I think I saw him. There's a very, very big need for more housing development for those that are extremely low income. And when we're talking about permanent supportive housing, someone said they didn't know what that was. That's what it is, permanent supportive housing. You also have to talk about, supportive services, systems navigation, how folks are actually finding upward mobility, but they can't do that if they really don't have, not necessarily affordable housing, but they don't have housing that is really, catered to them finding upward mobility and finding stability itself.
Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, no, just agreeing with what Dante said. I think, the most important intervention is being able to provide people with housing at rent levels that they can afford. And whether that's subsidizing the housing or just providing deed restricted housing at certain levels, like ELI, which is 30% or below of area minimum, we've got to create more of it. So Vivian's here. We have Calabasas Apartments that just opened up 145 units, 80 of those supportive housing, the rest extremely low income and very low income units. Kaifer Seniors, right contiguously, broke ground recently. Bella Vista is going forward. So there's a lot of projects. I think we need to push for more projects in every corner of the city wherever we can, because the affordability crisis is what's pushing people out onto the streets.
Thank you all so much. I know that even this over half an hour that we had this conversation feels really short, but we'll continue checking in with you all. We'll continue coming back to these questions of what do you want to dig into, but I think we have some initial answers. So what I've heard is a lot of interest in outreach. I've also heard, I think, interest in the sort of maybe looking into what what behavioral health supports are available, what are the barriers to people getting them, things like that. I've heard that I think Vivian's comment and some of the comments about affordable housing that people can actually afford to live in are connected, right? There's that long-term housing affordability that's just always going to be a challenge for almost everybody living in this area. And then I think there's also a thread that we can pick back up around the shelter, like the design of shelter, the shelter that's available, that I think is also an ongoing conversation in the county generally. So that's what I've heard so far. And we will dive into those topics over the next several task force meetings, and also keep checking in with you about where you want to go next. Any final, I want to leave a little bit of space just very briefly before I pass to my colleagues for final burning questions or comments. Anybody? Go ahead, Michelle. I think you're still muted, Michelle.
I wanted to hear from everyone's input just to get like a perspective on where the conversations and solutions are going. I noticed no one spoke about people that are not willing to leave their encampment just because they're afraid of getting housed just because of their possessions or pets. There's no transition to move them out of encampment, or people that have vehicles that are broken down and there's no way for them to move their vehicles from point A to point B. So there's a lot of, discrepancies with that. And I've spoken to some homeless people, and their concern is how do they transition from being homeless when they have all these other obligations? Who's going to take care of their animal if they want to go to work? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And how are they going to, get to their home? Because a lot of times, a lot of them don't leave their encampments just for these reasons. I know a lot of them don't have any resources like GA. They're mostly like homebodies. So I think not speaking for all of the homeless, just the people I've encountered, but that's been some of the issues that I've encountered with some of the people I've met in different parts of Santa Clara County, not just in shelters, but in hard to reach areas that are not televised or not, known to the public. They're just kind of hidden in places where they can't be reached.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that back, Michelle, because I know that's something you also brought up at the first task force meeting, and I think it's connected to the outreach piece. It's also connected to what support is available when someone moves out, and does it match what they need, right? Is someone's whole life being taken into account when we're designing shelter, when we're putting together the housing supports that folks have? Can people take their pets? If people have pets, are we thinking about that when we're doing helping people find jobs, right? All of that stuff. Yeah, so definitely something we will keep on the radar.
Yeah, just for myself, when I was getting housed, it was hard for me to find housing just because I have animals, and because I do have a troublesome past, and it was hard for me to obtain housing. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that had a troubled background, and it was just a long process. I'm grateful that I am housed now, but I'm not the only one that's in this situation. And I think that's why a lot of people don't want to go into housing, just because they have because certain things on your record do bar you from being housed, kind of. And especially if you have more than one or two animals, a lot of landlords, might not.
That can be really challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I won't make a long-winded comment, but
Thanks,
what I
Dante.
will say is this all sounds like, to me, low barrier, housing first, right? when we're talking about housing first, what does that look like? But I think that's something we should bring up in conversation later on too, you know, because I know I've heard what low housing or housing first means to certain providers, and it's very, in many ways, different than others.
All right. I am going to, okay, we have a,
If we can just reduce the barrier, like if they don't have a lot of like past judgment, then I'm sure a lot of people can get housed more. It wouldn't be like that barrier of difficulty of getting housed.
yeah, great. Thank you all so much. I have stolen a good 10 minutes of my colleagues' time with you all, trying to focus on the community engagement piece of this. So because we want to start working on how you all want to get information directly and specifically from members of the community in the city of Santa Clara. So I'm going to pass to Carla and/or Joy to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. So I will rely on Eli to switch the slides for me during this part. So we're going to move on to our community engagement conversation. So the reason we're kind of bringing this up is because now that we've covered the different program types, we want to get into this community engagement plan to kind of talk about, like Eli said, who you think the folks are that are important for us to talk to in this process, as well as kind of what you want to know from these different groups. So if we move to our next slide, so the goal of community engagement is going to be gathering information from different stakeholders that you as task force members and that the city identify as being important to this process. So the reason we're doing this obviously is going to be to identify what the local, unique needs and resources are in the city, and use this information to help guide the work of the task force as you all identify priorities and develop recommendations to reduce homelessness and its impact in the city. So we have a few ways that we're going to go about engaging the community. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the community kickoff event, which is going to be an open and virtual meeting that's going to provide an opportunity to all community members interested in having a voice in the planning process. And stay tuned for more information about kind of the date and time on that. We'll make sure to publicize that, and the city will definitely be posting that on their website and publicizing that event as well. The second opportunity to engage the community is going to be a more structured approach where we conduct individual interviews with about 3 to 4 identified stakeholders to gain more in-depth information. And then the third way are going to be focus groups, which is going to consist of 3 to 4 meetings with stakeholders identified by task force members and city staff. And we're actually going to, in a few minutes, do an activity with you guys to kind of brainstorm the folks you think we should engage in the focus group process, as well as what questions you would like for us to ask the folks in the focus groups. Finally, the last way that we're going to be engaging the community that's on this slide will be through stakeholder and provider surveys to allow those that work in the community and are on the ground to provide feedback. We're hoping these surveys will kind of be super accessible since they'll be available online, and kind of allow providers to really take their time to come up with their responses and answer the surveys on their own time. So this slide just kind of lists some examples of stakeholders that when we have worked in other communities, these are kind of the folks that we typically engage. So that includes housing and service providers, business and community leaders, neighborhood associations, folks that are in like the healthcare, behavioral health world, folks in the criminal legal system as well, representatives from schools, city departments, folks with lived experience that live in that community, and then also community members at large are also considered stakeholders in this process, of course. So on the next slide, so this slide, we just kind of wanted to emphasize for folks who are watching, who are community members at large, kind of the opportunities for folks to get involved in the process. So as I mentioned, we're going to have that community kickoff event where community members will be able to kind of come and have their voice heard. We also have the task force meetings in which we've got a Q&A going, and we, really aim to get to every question as much as we can. And then we also are always accepting public comments to our City of Santa Clara at homebaseccc.org email, which we check regularly. So now my short part is over, now that we kind of told you a little bit about how we're going to plan to engage the community. So now we really want this to be an open discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my colleague Joy for her to kind of facilitate this discussion.
Cool, thanks Carla. And Eli, if I can just get the share screen back from you. Sweet, thank you. Okay, so what you all are seeing right now is a Jamboard, and so this is just going to be our way of taking some visual notes for you all, but it's just a couple questions regarding the community engagement process. So we'd like to start off with the one that's on the screen. Who do you think should be a part of the community engagement process? So just to give you some examples, we've thought of, housing and service providers, business owners, neighborhood associations, and people with lived experience. So is there any other folks that you'd be interested in hearing from as part of this engagement process?
I think there should be a concerted effort to reach seniors. There's a lot of seniors living in rental properties in Santa Clara, a lot of severely rent burdened individuals. I know of a whole bunch of properties that are facing that right now. So it'd be great to get their perspective because they're clearly facing homelessness every day.
We're talking about subpopulations, I would say folks that have survived DV.
Okay.
I also think it would be great to talk to some affordable housing developers. And yeah, that's enough, but I think they're important players in this space.
Santiago, feel free to jump in.
Oh, I would say law enforcement, get their point of view, or since they're the ones who mainly get on the streets.
Also, property owners, landlords. I hate the word landlords, but that's what I mean.
Okay, great.
And then advocates, it could be housing advocates, it could be service provider advocates for certain populations as well. One thing we don't talk about either when we talk about law enforcement too, we also need to talk about reentry.
Cool. Lots of great ideas so far. Any other folks that we should be engaging?
Maybe some LGBTQ groups, because a major source of homelessness comes from people who come out as members of the LGBT community, and then they are kicked out of their homes by their families, and also maybe some foster kids too, because I heard many foster kids, once they age out of the foster care system, they're faced with either homelessness or going back to abusive households / families.
And then Ray's here too, but I would always look at public-private partnerships. Well, let's see where we can get some support there.
Dante, are you talking about things like the larger, more heavily moneyed business community in the area, the corporations, the big businesses? Is that what you're talking about?
For sure, and I would put public-private, yeah, public-private partnerships. You know, foundation stuff like that. Yeah.
Gotcha. I saw Michelle. Were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I was gonna say like two like I was gonna mention two places like the churches, because they're also like a big support in helping and assisting the homeless. And then Dante kind of like answered my question as far as like corporate, like the big tech companies like Yahoo, Apple, because they're also a part of the community, right? So I'd like to hear from them as well. You know, you never get to hear what they got to say, and in any of the platforms.
Yeah. And Santiago, you can go, and then Hong, you can go next.
I would say like health clinics and like the medical side of aspect of it.
VHHP would be great.
Because I grew up and went to school in Santa Clara, I think someone from, the school district, because I'm sure teachers and school counselors are probably seeing children that, come to school where parents don't have much resources and are trying to make ends meet, and to be connecting to those people because they're seeing, folks that are on the brink of homelessness on that end of the city.
Daniel, you can go ahead.
Veterans groups, because many vets sadly become homeless. PTSD is major, and other mental illness is a major factor in that, and also student groups, to talk, to deal with student homelessness, like San Jose State, like the one I was with, and also maybe even some community colleges too. SCSU SHA.
Gotcha.
And then I was gonna say immigration advocates as well. Like immigration is probably one that we definitely should talk about or bring to the table.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this one before we move to the next question?
PTA or transportation.
Santiago, you can go ahead.
Pet shelters.
Pet shelters. Okay. Oh, Michelle, I see you raising your hand. Oh, I think you're muted, Michelle.
Like the homeless, bring them in on action, front line, have some people from the community, maybe they have other solutions as well.
Yep. Okay. And Daniel, is your hand up from your previous comment, or did you have another one?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Great. Any more comments on this slide before we turn to the next question?
People with lived experience, I would put past consumers. People like, for me, I've been in the house for 10 years, pretty stable, stuff like that.
Great. All right. Okay, if there's no other comments or thoughts for this one, I'll flip us to the next question for the community engagement.
I got one more. I just got one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we can hear from like Humane Society as well, because they helped me when I was in the hospital. They helped me with my dogs. I didn't have anybody to watch over my animals, and I'm sure they help other homeless people that had pets. So I would like to hear from them as well.
You said pet hospitals, right?
Pet hospitals and Humane Society.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then Joy, the last one I would say for me, I was just thinking about is it says property owners and landlords, but more or less opposition groups. We never bring them to the table. We need to bring somebody to the table from them.
Good point. Okay. So, are there any thoughts, seeing a lot of different groups of folks on the board, are there any thoughts about who, we should prioritize in hearing from? Seeing that we have, a limited amount of time to get all this information and such, is there any, like if you could pick your top three, what would that be?
Homeless, landlords, and just corporate.
Okay, cool. Anyone else thoughts on how you'd prioritize reaching out to these folks?
Did I hear someone say neighborhoods?
Yeah, I say neighborhood association. I think the neighbors have a lot to input in this situation. Remember what I see on the next door?
Yeah, I would diddle that and put them under a lot of times opposition.
For myself, I'd like to hear from the affordable housing developers, property owners, and business owners.
Yeah. Lori, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's crazy because I was getting super emotional because I would say the landlords especially, oh my gosh, I want to get emotional. So back during the pandemic, first of all, I want to say thank you because I see Jennifer's name on here, and we were helped by the whole COVID-19 because we moved into a beautiful 3-story, 2-bedroom house here. We moved in with a roommate because we were going to help the single lady and her 3 kids, and I'll be real quick. And unfortunately, as soon as we moved in, she brought her meth head husband in, which he was supposed to go to rehab for a year. And we're like, no, sorry, he can't stay here. He ended up staying anyway. And my boyfriend works at the family courthouse helping addicts. And we had to call the police so many times. It was so embarrassing. And so we finally got a restraining order to get them out of here. But then we were burdened with the whole rent of almost like $4,000 a month. And there's only 2 of us. And I'm on Social Security disability because I've had some real serious medical issues. And so once we got the help from the city, as soon as the landlords got paid, we got a 60-day notice. And it was like, wow, like seriously, like here we are. And not only that, but we were also becoming foster care parents. I'm happy to say that we just have been approved a month ago because we have so much space that we wanted to, to bless kids. And so, I've been listening to all of you. No, I don't want to cry. And I just became so emotional because we were homeless for 6 months, 2-3 years ago before we met her. And, and I would have never thought that would happen to me. And it happened to me because of a domestic violence relationship that I got out of after 30 years. Right. So anyway, I would just say that property owners and landlords, because they take that money real quick, but then they look at you as, oh, you can't pay, even though you're doing everything you can and getting extra work and, doing whatever you have to do to make the rent. And we have been paying the rent since that. And I don't know how, because it's way too much. But anyway, sorry. I almost didn't talk because it's just so emotional. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Lori. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dante.
I was gonna say my 3 would probably be public-private partnerships, consumers, all consumers with lived experience, and to me, I think really like opposition groups.
Gotcha.
What does that mean, opposition groups?
So NIMBYs, people that oppose us doing certain developments in the community. They fight it. Where I live, Peacock Common, in the beginning, a lot of folks in the community didn't want it, and they still don't want it. There's neighbors that are still fighting to somehow get this shut down in many ways, even if that's just calling the police, numerous times over and over again. Instead of having conversations with folks, the easiest thing to do is just call police. And I believe there's an officer on here. He probably has heard about the stories here at Peacock Commons. But, at the end of the day, it's just like we all need to figure out how to coexist, right? Everybody's trying to survive. Everybody, I believe housing is a human right, and folks should be able to, have that.
Yeah. And I want to call out, like, one of the things that I think is so important about a community process is that vision of everybody needs to be able to exist here, right? This is a whole community. And so I love that the folks that we want to talk to are on this board are so diverse in terms of, the roles they play in the community and the experiences. I do want to call it also that one of the things that we can do, because we do have a limited scope of community outreach that we're going to be doing for focus groups, a survey, a community engagement event, we may not be able to meet individually and directly with a group that meets each of these sort of focus priorities that you have, but we'll hit, we'll make sure to hear from your all's top priorities. And also we can do targeted outreach, right? We may not have one focus group for, VHHP, but we can make sure that if we're getting input from providers, we can make sure that VHHP, which is Valley Homeless Healthcare Program, is on that list, right? And we can make sure we're reaching out to people with lived experience who are veterans to come to a lived experience focus group, that kind of stuff. So we'll keep that in mind as well.
Thanks, Eli. Okay, so I'll move us over to our next question, and we'll spend about 20 minutes-ish on this before wrapping up. But we want to know, what do you want to know from these community groups and members? So any types of questions that you'd like to ask folks, whether it's like through the survey or in focus groups, anything that you're curious about that comes to mind. Oh, and we do have some examples at the top of the page.
You can think specifically about the folks you wanted to hear from. So what questions do you want to ask members of law enforcement? What questions do you want to ask people who are currently unhoused? What do you want to know?
Adam, would you like to go?
I think one thing that would be helpful for us to know is which resources, like where are people going? What's most convenient? Because we don't have a lot of resources in the city. So what services are they using and what's most convenient?
Go ahead, Lori. Oh, gotcha. Any other questions?
I'd love to hear how, some of the community members feel like the city should be investing its limited resources in addressing homelessness. What strategies are they supportive of?
Okay. Yeah, Sergeant Gray, go ahead.
I think it's going to be important for us to not just kind of be aiming in the dark, but be evidence-based and fact-based. So look at different things that are in existence right now and what's working and what's not working.
Okay, so I'm hearing.
So like as an example, like Covenant House has been, I think, a good success story, and it hasn't drawn a lot of the you know, the negativity that I think maybe some community members would think would come with a project like that. And then there are others that have attracted a lot of, you know, negative activity. And so diving deeper into that, talking to the folks at these different places that currently exist and seeing what works, what doesn't work.
Sure. Makes sense. Okay, Lori, do you have your hand up?
Yeah. So what I was gonna say was asking those questions about to the opposition, like what are you afraid of? You know, why? I think it would be really good to have like a question and answer time with people that are having a hard time with, you know, people moving into their neighborhood because they think that they're better than others, you know, and that's the saddest thing about this whole thing, especially listening to the, you know, Peacock comments. Like, it's just something that, oh gosh, it irks me that people feel like that, because we all come from somewhere. And I think that having maybe like a time where those people that you see complaining on Nextdoor all the time, you're asking them, why are you so afraid? You know, I mean, we understand, okay, there's more trash here or whatever, but, you know, having them maybe see the whole picture is what I was kind of thinking.
Yeah, I want to jump in and raise a comment that we got in the Q&A, which I think is sort of in this area of like the need for education, like outreach and education within the community, because again, like we are a whole community. we are all people who are in, well, I'm not physically in the city of Santa Clara, but I'm with you in spirit at the moment. And it's, you know, we can't, it's going to be hard if we're leaving people behind in the conversation. So yeah, that need for community education for sure. Okay.
Eli, just to that point, the question I think that follows that is, or comes along with it is there interest for that community engagement and outreach? Because we can do a ton of that work, and we've tried doing that destination home through housing ready communities, but we have to have willing folks who want to learn.
I mean, to that point though, it depends on what folks you're talking about. But as a consumer, I know a lot of the young people here, they're just twiddling their thumbs here at Peacock because they don't know what is available to them. And it's so confusing as to who gets what based on their status, if you will. Like, I'm a HUD client, right? It's very different than someone that isn't, right? Like, I get certain resources that they don't. And so I think a lot of people are not educated at all, and there's no one really teaching them. And so you got young people just sitting here all day long doing not that much, right? And so we need to be, as we bring in people into services, it doesn't matter who it is. I don't know who has to hold people accountable to do this, whether it's the COC or not, but folks need to be really able to engage folks as to what the services they are getting are and how they can best utilize them in the most efficient manner to actually build the skill sets that they need, whether that's around mental health, financial literacy, education around parenting. It doesn't matter what it is. We need to be educating folks on what the services are that they qualify for, how they can best get them, and then go from there. You know, we don't do that really well as a community, to me. And then we also, just one thing I want to know is, when are we going to reduce caseloads for social workers, case managers, outreach workers? There is just too many people per one person. And, you know, you're being spread thin. You know, we need to really look at this from a humanistic or a humane, you know, point of view. And this is an individual in front of us, not a data point. Yes, data will come out of it, but it's a human being in front of us, and we need to be able to give them time. You need to invest time into these folks and uplift them.
Great thoughts.
I agree with that too, but I feel like the homeless need to put a piece of their part into. I don't know how we have to say a question about that. Like, what part are they putting in as well? Like, because it I don't know how I wouldn't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I think
consumers.
Joy, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, 1 second. I just want to clarify what Santiago's comment was about. I think it cut off a little bit at the beginning. So who are you thinking about asking that question to, Santiago?
I guess just the consumers, I guess, like what part are they putting in? And in the sense of it, everything just can't come to us, you know, we got to go get what we want sometimes. And sometimes some of us don't have the opportunity to do that for specific different reasons. I just don't know how I would just say that.
So Santiago, are you kind of saying something about kind of like what's keeping you from seeking services?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention something. So foster youth, for instance, and it's sad because it's like a it's like a school to prison pipeline, and it's very real. I didn't know when I emancipated Santiago that I can go to a 4-year university for free, a public university for free. I went to San Jose State for free once I realized that, and I also realized that certain providers actually can pay for my education. And so I started saying, hey, I heard y'all can help pay for these things. I need you to help me with these things. But again, when folks don't have the knowledge, they can't move forward. And it's not everyone that doesn't have the knowledge, but folks need to have the information in order to move forward. At the end of the day, like my whole goal with my own organization is to get folks through trades or through CSUs or community college with a degree because it's free and I can show them how to do it. And I've showed them plenty of times. I just had a young woman finish her bachelor's and she's already going to University of Hawaii to get her MPA, and we're going to help her pay for it and make sure she doesn't pay a dime because it's free. You get what I'm saying? Folks need to have information. If they don't have the information, how can they find stability and upward mobility if they don't know what's out there for them?
Yeah. And I know I do see folks waiting to offer comments as well. So I think we'll go Sergeant Digger, Lori, and then Michelle. Oh, were those?
I apologize. I still had it up. So.
Okay, gotcha. Michelle, you can go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna kind of like to speak from my experience. When I've been housed now for going almost on 3 years, and it's been the best experience because it's reduced a lot of problems in my life. I'm part of society now, and the concerns that my landlord had was, you know, my credit score, my criminal record, that type of stuff. And we had a discussion with me, my housing specialist, the landlord, the property owners where I live, because they had a lot of concerns about me as a renter, me as, you know, an applicant, and they were really hesitant because they were like judging me, you know, like you're judging a book by its cover. But once they got to know me, like I'm a human being, I'm not like a piece of document, I'm not a, you know, status quo on data, but I'm actual a human being that's been, you know, survival mode for so many years because I was homeless. And once we established, you know, the trust, the communication, then they went ahead and gave me an opportunity and a chance to rent to me. And so I've been living at my place now for a little over 2 years. And I see the landlord, we have a good communication, we have a good relationship. And he lets me know that he's happy with the decision that he's made to rent to me because I broke pretty much all his barriers that he had, like people that like me. So I wanted to hear concerns, you know, from the landlord, from different other people in the community, because not everyone looks the part. You know, I'm not my past. My past does not define me, and I'm like doing 90% better. I'm making better choices. I'm hanging out with different types of people. You know, my animals are secure. You know, I have a roof over my head. I have locked doors. I'm a part of a community now. So it's nice. It's nice now to be like just put in like one category. You know, now I'm considered a member of society. So I just want to hear like concerns and worries from the community, because like, you know, like Dante was saying, like a lot of those folks are not educated on, you know, people like us, right? So, and I feel like I'm one of those few people that broke down barriers. You know, so in the near future, if he wants to rent out to another party that was homeless, he won't be so afraid in renting out a house or an apartment or room to that individual, you know? So that's just kind of like what I want to, you know, kind of get a feedback on from other
Yeah,
parts.
yeah. So does this question get at what you're saying, Michelle, of just wanting to know what the landlord's concerns are about renting to people who are unhoused?
Yeah, yeah, because I went through a tough process, and thank God I had an advocate, a housing advocate that spoke on my behalf. Because they were hesitant in the beginning, because, you know, they do a credit check, and your credit history comes up, like your criminal record, like your living situation, if you ever like live somewhere else besides the streets or besides the car or shelter, have you ever lived in another apartment? Because it all comes up. And because my credit score is low, I mean, it's like really bad. At first, they weren't going to rent to me, because certain places require that you have like 650 credit score. Mine was like 418 or 500, right? Because I owe student loans from years past. And thank God that I had somebody that spoke on my behalf and said, oh, you know, this person, you know, has staying out of trouble. This person has been making positive changes in her life. And, you know, just, and then they like gave me a chance, you know, and I overcame that barrier. And now he doesn't see me like an ex-criminal or a homeless person. He sees me as an individual. He sees me as a human being. Yeah, that I did make mistakes. Yes, I did. I'll admit to that. I will hold myself accountable, but that's not gonna like be the rest of my life story. You know, like I'm changing every day. Like I'm, you know, like I said, I'm not, um, you know, causing trouble to anybody. I'm not committing any more crimes. I'm not making poor choices. So being housed has changed me, and it's just like I don't want to get emotional, but it's changed me as a whole. You know, because I was scared to trust other people when I got housed. You know, I didn't want housing services because I was homeless for so many years, and I was scared to be in a place that I didn't know and I wasn't familiar, and I was gonna live alone, and had all these worries and concerns, um and I almost didn't get housed because I was scared. I didn't trust, and then, you know, I had a good housing. I had a caseworker. I had a social worker that were telling me, you know, don't be afraid. We got you. You're gonna be taken care of, and they were true on their word. You know, they helped me, and being housed, I never want to be homeless. I'm doing everything in my power where I don't end up being homeless again. Um, but it's changed me as a person, as a woman, as a human being. And I want to give back to my community because I know what it's like to struggle, having somebody take care of my dog when I want to go shower, or if I have a job and I can't take my dogs with me to the job site. So I had to have somebody watch my dogs. And sometimes those folks weren't stable themselves because they were either on drugs or they were mentally ill. So sometimes I would like have to opt out of a job or not go to my housing appointment. And it was just a lot of factors that kept it kind of like not as easy. But by
Yeah.
God, I'm glad that, you know, I got housed. And because I got housed, I don't act like I'm better than anyone. Because, you know, I believe in God, and I feel like if I forget where I came from, if I forget the pain and the struggle that took me this far, you know, I feel like God's gonna knock me off the high horse and, you know, put me back being homeless. And I don't want to be homeless because I'm an older person. I have 2 animals, and it was hard being homeless, you know. So
Yeah, yeah,
I want to like give back, you know, and let people know there is hope, you know,
yeah,
to believe in yourself, because I think that's the core issue too, that a lot of people don't believe they can have it as good. They don't believe that they can be housed and be helped and have assistance and have resources, you know?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Michelle, and thanks for sharing your experience. We being mindful of time, I know that we have folks with their hands up, so I think I'll pass to Dante and then we can hear from Lori as well before we wrap up.
What do we want to know from these community members and groups? What are you doing to help folks with, criminal passes? Like our county has a expungement program right now, right? Like folks need to know about that. As long as you don't got an active case or pending charge and you're staying out of trouble, you can go through the process if that case or what you're trying to expunge was here in this county. So folks need to know those things. Then secondly, like what type of services are folks needing holistically? We don't serve in a holistic manner. We need to look at serving in a holistic manner. And Santiago, I think when what you're talking about is like, well, what I perceive it to be is like, how are people holding themselves accountable as consumers? And I think a lot of that goes into finding this balance of like what they actually need instead of fitting into a system. And one thing that we have to learn too is that we do have what I would like to call consumer, burnout, right? Like we do, have clients that are client burnout as well, if you will. Like we're spreading them so thin. Folks need all these different services. They got to go to so many places. How are we actually making it a like one-stop shop hub type of situation where folks can get to the highest quality of services without having been spread thin? But it does have to do with a lot of accountability. Once I figured out I got school for free, I was like, okay, let me go to school one class at a time, become a student, and then I'll start increasing my load. But at the end of the day, folks need to be able to hold themselves accountable, build these things up, but they also need to have folks on the other side of the coin as service providers holding themselves accountable, make sure that they give consumers resources at the highest level.
Right, I agree. I totally agree.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dante.
And Michelle, you keep being a rock star. I know it's tough, but you keep going.
Yeah, we gotta connect on the school. We gotta connect on the free school because I want to one day, have a degree, be a CEO of a company, because I've been like the CEO of the streets.
I put my number and information in the chat. Reach out to me anytime. I know we're stressed on time, but reach out to me.
Yeah, no, I love the community building, but we do need to wrap up. So we're gonna go to Lori and then we're gonna wrap up. Sorry about that.
Just a quick question, and it doesn't have to be addressed today, but from maybe like the people that do the housing. So one thing that I found frustrating is that I knew a lady who very closely, and she was homeless for many years. And then it was a blessing. She got put up in a beautiful brand new apartment in downtown San Jose. But this apartment has so many, and she's only paying $50 a month. But these apartments have so many people that are still very active in their addiction. And it's becoming, I don't go there and visit because it was a family member's sister from a while ago. But these people are getting $50 a month and they're using, hardcore drugs. And I'm just wondering, is there a system in place where, people who are doing this and not trying to get help, is that how it was meant to be? Or should people be held accountable, because there's people out there that try hard not to do drugs, I guess, and they need a place too. So I don't know, just a question for later on. And I'm just wondering if there's accountability in that part of housing.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lori, and thanks everyone for your participation with the Jamboard and all of your good thoughts and questions. I will share my screen and go ahead and close us out. All right, so just to provide you with a little bit of a timeline for our next few task force meetings, today we have identified some priorities for the community engagement plan. And then in the next step, we reflect how we are going to continue to gather and synthesize community input for the community engagement process and through which avenues we'll continue to do that. And we'll look towards identifying and refining some goals and objectives for our draft plan, as well as looking ahead to September when our team will draft the plan in collaboration with the folks from the city. And for our next task force meeting, we'll be convening again on Thursday, June 23rd, same time from 6 to 8 p.m. We have a couple topics for discussion planned out in terms of updating you all on how the community engagement process is going, as well as discussing some emerging themes, and also coordinating outreach and task force involvement in this continued community engagement process. But we do thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you next week. Looking forward to seeing you all again at next month's meeting. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
Joy, real quick, how do I get a hold of like people like Dante or like the providers that I haven't heard of, like Homebase and like you know, how do I get their, like, do I look it up on Google? Because I don't know their names. Like Dante, I don't know what agency he works for, or how
I
do
put my info in the chat, but if Eli, you connect with me all the time. If you can share my contact with this whole group, that would be great. I just actually put something in the chat to say like we're having our first lived experience barbecue this Sunday. So anyone, whether you're a lived experience or not, want to come out and join, I would love to have all you out there with us. It's going to be in San Jose off of closer to Heading area, but anyone reach out to me, I can give you the information.
What's your agency? What's your agency, Dante?
It's called Raising the Bar. We provide mentorship and housing to transition age youth coming out of foster care in the juvenile justice system.
Yeah, and Dante, we absolutely can pass on your contact information to the whole group, and also Michelle specifically to you to make sure you get that, because love to make that connection.
For sure. Thanks. Have a good night, everyone. Peace and love to you.
Yeah, you too,
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
You guys, thank you for having us.